Before we get started, there's just a few housekeeping items. If you're interested in continuing education credit for your attendance today, please remember to sign in and out on the designated sheet. This meeting is being webcast. We respectfully request that when called upon to speak, please come to the speaker's table and speak directly into the microphone. This will ensure those individuals watching the webcast are aware of all discussion and action. As indicated on the agenda, the board has a significant number of items for consideration. Items may be taken out of order. We respectfully request that individuals providing public comment be respectful of board member time and refrain from restating comments previously considered by members of the board, whether those comments occurred during the committee meeting or during this meeting. I thank you in advance for your consideration and cooperation. Later today, the board will convene in closed session. Upon conclusion of closed session, the board will reconvene in open session and will be adjourned at that time. The board does not intend to webcast that portion of the meeting. I thank you all for attending. I will now take a roll call to establish a quorum. What roll call? We'll start from the right. Albert.
Albert Wong, professional member.
Debbie Veal, professional member.
Ryan Brooks, public member.
Lavanza Butler, professional member.
Greg Lippy, public member.
Maria Serpa, professional member.
Alan Shad, professional member.
Ricardo Sanchez, public member.
Great. I will now turn the meeting over to Ricardo Sanchez to provide a report on the Communication and Public Education Committee activities. It's agenda item number 7. Ricardo?
Thank you. Good morning, and welcome to the best committee of the Pharmaceutical Board.
Please be nice to Ricardo. He has a cold.
Yesterday, the committee met, and we did the review of online registry being developed for pharmacies providing healthcare services. A little background on that. At the July 2019 committee meeting, staff proposed creating a registry of pharmacy health services on the board's website. This includes medications that pharmacists can furnish without a prescription pursuant to SB 493 or other legislation. Consumers will be able to search the registry to find pharmacies offering these health services. The board approved the committee's recommendations to direct staff to evaluate creating that registry. Bob Davila, our public information officer, will discuss the updates that we had yesterday, since he's the one that's been working on them. Has done a fabulous job. Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you. Good morning, board members. I'm Bob Davila, the public information officer. At the committee meeting yesterday, staff provided a demonstration of the registry, which is being developed by DCA. We went over how the pages would look and informed the committee that pharmacies can choose to be listed or not be listed on the registry. Consumers will be able to use the registry to find pharmacies that offer these health services. And you'll recall these are health services that are offered, authorized by SB 493 or other legislation. The registry, we expect, should be up and running as early as this spring. At the meeting yesterday, committee members discussed some follow-up. They suggested that we find a way to include pharmacists on the list who are not associated with pharmacies, but who are still nevertheless offering these types of services so that consumers can find them as well. And also, committee members suggested that we find a way to periodically check in or ping some of our registry members each year just to verify that they're still active and on the list. Other than that, we've included information with the registry so that consumers who search it can call in advance before they go down to make sure that these services are still being offered. And we've set up a way so that they can notify us by email if they discover any errors or out-of-date information on the registry. So, as I said, we hope to have it up and running by this spring. Thank you.
I'll just say, board member, comments?
Okay. I wanted to try. Oh, thank you. I was wondering if PEP and PrEP could be added to this list too. Would that be appropriate? And then I'd like to know, just for information in the future, how often this is accessed. I like the idea, but I want to see if it's how used it is. And so just thinking about reporting in the future for that.
Absolutely. And in answer to your first question, we will have a way to add future services that pharmacists may be offering, such as HIV, PEP, and PrEP, and a way for them to let us know when they've stopped offering services. And we would be happy to provide the committee and the board with information on a regular basis as to how many hits were getting used.
Yeah, we'll continue to update, the board as we get feedback from the public and also the stockholders. We'll just keep adding to it. Any more member questions? Seeing none. Any public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on. Public education material regarding SB 159. It's related to HIV exposure and post-exposure prophylaxis. A little background. At the November 2019 board meeting, the board directed the committee to develop public education materials regarding SB 159. The licensing committee is currently developing regulations to implement SB 159 by July 1st, 2020. SB 159 authorizes qualified pharmacists to furnish HIV exposure and post-exposure prophylaxis. Staff is currently monitoring the licensing committee's work to identify information that would be helpful to educate pharmacists and consumers. For example, at the January 9th licensing meeting, stakeholders discussed educating pharmacists about operational issues related to SB 159, such as what type of records to keep and how long to keep them. And I will go ahead and have Bob also elaborate on that.
At the meeting yesterday, staff suggested that we use many of our traditional methods of communication, such as the website, subscriber alerts, and scripted articles to educate licensees about SB 159. We also are working with the State Office of AIDS and other state agencies and community organizations to develop effective educational materials for the public as the implementation of SB 159 rolls out. At the discussion yesterday, the committee members emphasized encouraging the licensees to get involved in furnishing HIV medication, as well as naloxone and other medications authorized by SB 493. The committee suggested using videos, script articles, and other ways to share information about how pharmacists are using these services or providing these services already as a way to educate pharmacists who may have some questions about how to do it, and to encourage them to get involved in offering HIV PrEP, PEP, and other services authorized by SB 159.
Okay. Any questions from our board members?
I just wanted to expand a little bit upon what you just said, Bob. I think what we discussed yesterday is that what we've heard in some various committee meetings is that the actually operationalizing these like 159 and some of the other services has been a barrier for some pharmacies. Like, okay, I get it, I can do this stuff. Now, how do I really do 159? I took the training, I'm all ready to go, but how do I really make it happen in my pharmacy? How do I bill? How do I, how do I set it up? And so that's one of the things that we are hoping that maybe we could reach out to various stakeholders who have successfully implemented these programs and share that maybe through videos that Bob's talking about. And I think we also talked about even like some of the forms that, the patient forms, that maybe we would also address those. In the past, we've had suggested forms you could use, and we just probably need to look and refresh because we've had a couple new programs come up.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from our board members? Seeing none. Any public comments?
Good morning, board members. Danny Martinez with the California Pharmacists Association. Bob and I had a brief discussion yesterday. We'd be willing to help out with that sort of communication on operationalizing. A lot of our members have started that, and some of them have even completed a program. So just want to let this board know, and for anyone who's watching, CPHA is completely engaged in this and will be helping its members operationalize 159 activities.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate that, Danny, because you guys probably do have the access and the experts that we could. But anybody else too?
Is that Debbie down there? Yeah. Any more public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to discussion and consideration of proposed changes to notice to consumer poster. A little background. Members asked staff to recommend ways to refresh the notice to consumers' posters. California Code of Regulations, Section 1707.6 requires pharmacies to post the notice in a prominent location in the pharmacy. The regulation also provides specific wording for the notice, and that's in your attachment 1, which contains the current notice to consumers' posters and the text of CCR Section 1707.6, and Bob will touch on that also.
At the meeting yesterday, we suggested that the committee and the board may want to consider possible changes in the wording on the notice to consumers. As you may know, the text that's currently on the poster is spelled out in the regulation, Section 1707.6, so any changes in wording would require at least a change in the regulation. But it was noted that some of the information on there, staff noted for one thing, that some of the information that's not on there is information that's been adopted since the poster was created. For example, changes to prescription labeling requirements, which took effect in 2015, such as font sizes and other things, are not currently mentioned on the poster. We suggested that it might be appropriate to take a look at those issues, see if there were other things that might be on the poster before we redesign, do any redesign of the poster itself. During the discussion, some of the committee members raised some really interesting points and good points about whether or not information that's currently on there is currently relevant or as urgent as it was when it was first put on there. For example, information about interpretive services, which now has its own designated poster in pharmacies, as you know, and information about drug pricing, which was really a hot issue at the time, but may not be as much today. The committee members and members of the public who spoke noted that some types of information that are not on the poster might be more helpful to consumers, such as information about asking your pharmacist what your medication is for. So the committee directed us to seek out information from consumers and report back on what kind of information might be more relevant on a notice to consumers. In addition, members gave some thought to do we want to continue a notice to consumers? And they asked us to report back as well on what kind of statutory or regulatory changes might be necessary if the board were to decide to repeal the notice to consumers requirement.
Okay. Any board member comments? Seeing none. Public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to our section D, which is educating licensees about possible consequences of DUI convictions. A little background. Members suggested providing education to warn licensees about the possible professional consequences if they are convicted of driving under the influence, a DUI. The board asked the Communication and Public Education Committee to discuss this matter. And we did a little research, and Bob, I'll have him elaborate a little bit on what staff has been doing.
At the meeting yesterday, we suggested that perhaps we could run some articles in the script spelling out essentially what could be the potential consequences and explaining to licensees so they have a better understanding of how your actions outside the pharmacy can affect your life inside the pharmacy, that is your license. So we were open to doing articles about that. Members of the committee were encouraged by that, and they also suggested that maybe we could do an article on the top 10 reasons a license get revoked. The idea is simply to remind licensees that consequences that you may think affect your life only outside your pharmacy could have an impact on your license as well, and we want to make sure that that's clear. So this could be something in addition to currently the disciplinary cases that we run in each issue of the script, just so that licensees have a better understanding of how things in their entire life could affect what they do in their workplace.
By the way, if you weren't here yesterday and you feel a vibration right now, we're not having an earthquake. We happen to be above the washing machines.
Ricardo, do we have any statistic how many percentage of our disciplinary action is the DUI? I noticed it's very high compared to other incidents.
We don't have those numbers, I don't believe, do we?
But I would like you, when you send out those information, and put what the percentage of our disciplinary is DUI. I mean, to me, it seems like it's almost like 70% to 80% of our disciplinary action is DUI.
We can certainly look into that, absolutely. Thank you.
I'm not sure we could run a query on that as far as how many have had the DUIs and come back to the board and give you a percentage?
Yeah, we can absolutely pull that. I do think that the majority of DUIs are probably resolved through a citation.
Okay, at our next...
But we can pull the data,
At our
absolutely.
next board meeting, we'll research that and get it right back to you, Albert.
I'm really happy to see that we're doing this too, because I speak to a lot of pharmacists that seem to not know that it's a problem. So I really appreciate us taking care of this.
And Bob, as I thank you, well, first, thank you for your work on this, but as I mentioned yesterday on this topic, it's not just DUIs. I mean, one, the focus, I think you're right on target, things that can affect your license outside of the pharmacy, I think that is imperative. But, I would like to see, the top 5 reasons outside of the pharmacy why pharmacists lose their license. DUI is probably, on the top, but there are other things, abuse and other things, cases that we see. And I think that would be helpful. So I appreciate your work. Thank you.
That's information we could actually put separate, we could have something focusing on DUIs, but also just more general information about other reasons why pharmacists might lose their license for actions outside the pharmacy.
Bob, we had a lot of repeated DUI also, okay, so emphasize on that. And you weren't there. One time we have a case, the guy have 5 DUI, and they come in and ask for reinstate the license. So I asked him, I say, is it very easy for you to get a pharmacy a degree? He said, yeah, no, it's very, very hard. So I say, what the hell do you understand that, you got 5 DUI, when you going to learn? So, people do it over again. So make sure they understand once they get more than 1 or 2 DUI, they might lose their license.
Okay. Any more member questions? Seeing none. Public questions or comments? Okay. Well, then seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to section E, which is update on communication and public education activities by board staff. We'll go over the script. Staff reported articles for the next issue of the script that they are undergoing legal review. The next issue will focus on new laws for 2020 and include articles which will include the top 10 citations, corresponding responsibilities, tips, and reporting data to cures. Now, there was we had some discussion yesterday, and we're having Bob look into them, but I'll have Bob elaborate a little bit on some questions that came up that he's going to be researching.
Most of the discussion was on this article about just explaining more to licensees the impact of DUIs and other activity outside the behavior, outside the pharmacy on their license. We also did talk about other publications that will be in the script, such as we plan to have 2 case studies, one involving shortages and how that affects counts in the pharmacy, and another involving compounding errors. So we want to try to focus on specific cases without using names or other identifying information, just that are educational for licensees to see what kinds of issues arise when inspectors come to pharmacies and how pharmacies can avoid these issues in their own practice.
Any board comments? Seeing none. Public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to projects. Billboards with the board's Use Don't Abuse campaign were erected in September. Outfront Media generously donated 2 billboards in the Sacramento area and 1 in Fresno. 2 additional locations are planned in Southern California. A photo of 1 billboard next to the Highway 50 in West Sacramento and a press release issued by DCA are in your attachment 2 for the board members. I would like to just acknowledge and also give thanks to Ryan Brooks, one of our own members, who was responsible for making this happen for the general public. I mean, they generously donated this billboard. So, Ryan Brooks, thank you very much. And I think your generosity would save some lives. Thank you very much. Also, staff is working on a new pharmacy law update webinar for 2020 The webinar will be posted on the Billboard's website also. Any member comments? Seeing none, any public comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to news media and public outreach. And both of those I will give over to Bob to go over, since he's been working on them. But I first want to acknowledge Bob Davila for all his work he has done. It's easy for us to sit here and say, give me this, do that. There's a lot of work that goes behind it, and a lot of staff, a lot of hours, and he's done a fabulous job helping me with this committee, but also providing this board the information that we're able to also get out to the public. So thank you, Bob. And with that, if you could go over the news media and the public outreach.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Just want to let the board know we include, as we do at each board meeting, a list of news media inquiries we've received regarding recent stories in the news. Those are in your attachment 4 in your materials. And finally, we've included as well a list of public outreach that staff and inspectors have done. That's included in attachment 5 in your materials. Thank you.
Mr. President, that's the report.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Ricardo. I'm going to now turn the meeting over to Alan Shadd to provide a report on the Enforcement Committee activities. Alan?
I think I'd catch on. Okay.
Take advantage of this, Alan. We actually want to hear you right now.
Wow.
All right. Here. Oh my God! What a difference. Okay. The Enforcement Committee report. We have first the discussion and consideration of inventory reconciliation and report requirements for controlled substances, including discussion and consideration of possible amendments to Title 16. CCR 1715.65. Let me see. Okay. During our last meeting, we continued our discussion on the board's policy of reconciliation and reporting requirements. As part of the review, we noted that the clarity was required in the regulation regarding the use of ADDS and the term satellite location. Further, in response to the comments received, the committee sought to provide clarification on its expectations with respect to reconciliation activities related to Schedule 3 through 5 medications. As you may recall, we offered amendments to the regulation of the board's consideration as part of the November 2019 meeting. Ultimately, the board referred the matter back to committee for additional consideration, but did release a policy statement regarding the requirements for ADDS inventory in inpatient hospitals, as well as clarity on satellite pharmacies. Subsequent to the board meeting, and in consideration of comments received by the board, we've worked with staff and council to draft possible amendments to the current regulation for your review. You'll note that the changes to the regulation also included electronic signature provision. Also, we recommended a more targeted approach for annual inventory reconciliation on 3 through 5s. These essentially were drugs that had more than 25,000 dosage units stolen in the previous year. So these 4 drugs include alazepam 1 milligram, alazepam 2 milligrams, tramadol 50 milligrams, and phenergan with codeine syrup. Attachment 1, the one labeled 1715.65, which has the recommended changes that we talked about yesterday. We received comments regarding the proposal. In general, the comments were supportive of the 4 targeted medications. However, concerns were raised about inventory reconciliation reporting requirements for all Schedule 3 to 5 medications on a periodic basis. Ultimately, as the committee, we modified it just to require an inventory for Schedules 3 through 5 biannually, and only require a full reconciling report as a drug loss is identified. The committee clarified that a single report can be completed for a hospital pharmacy that has satellite areas and ADDS. The committee considered a suggestion to include buprenorphine products as the targeted area, but ultimately decided it was not appropriate at this time. This morning, you should have received the updated language that incorporates the committee's direction. Any board comment? Public comment?
Steve Gray is an individual. First of all, compliments, Alan. It was an excellent meeting yesterday, a lot of good discussion, and I think a lot of things that are left to do, of course, and I trust that that will happen. I just wanted a little further information to the whole board and the audience as to why I suggested that as a targeted drug, buprenorphine be added. I find that a lot of people, including people yesterday who were on the board, didn't realize that when you made the switch from reporting all schedules 3 through 5 to just the targeted drugs, that eliminated buprenorphine, because buprenorphine is Schedule 3 at the federal level and Schedule 5 at the state level. And so I know that you intend to further study that as more information comes in, but there's quite a bit of information now in the trade news, in the professional news about diversion and abuse of buprenorphine. So I just wanted to say that's why I brought that up yesterday.
I thought that was an excellent point, and I really appreciate it, and we're going to keep our eye on that because it's one of the upcoming ones, yes, as you pointed out.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good morning. John Gray with Kaiser Permanente. I just want to thank the committee for hearing our feedback yesterday, and also thank the committee chair, the executive officer, and council for burning the midnight oil last night to make these changes to the proposed reg. Based on my reading of the proposed reg as it is right now, it's very responsive to the feedback we provided and looks good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board members?
I had a question, I guess, for you, Mr. Chair, and then and also to see if members of the public are interpreting the terms in the new section 3A and B the way that I have, and maybe it's just my simplification of the terms. But I have concern over the term that's used, inventory reconciliation. I know that doesn't refer to the report itself, but just that there is an inventory. But as a practitioner, to me, the reconciliation is all the steps required to prepare a report. And so I thought that during the committee meeting that we read 3A and 3B is how shall I word this? That for any other controlled substances that was identified during an inventory, period, inventory, just the word inventory, not an inventory reconciliation. So if there's a loss identified during an inventory that's done either after the count of a single prescription or a weekly inventory or whatever the inventory process is for the site, and they designated there's a loss, that would trigger 3A and B. It would not be only pursuant to an inventory reconciliation, which is a full accounting of the inputs and the outputs. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Maria, I'm trying to follow, and you probably know this a lot better than I do. What 3A and B, I see 1, 2, and then there's a 3. Can you just kind of help me understand what page you're on? And 'cause there's a couple 3s in here.
I'm sorry, what was the question, Ms. Gill?
I don't know where I'm not clear where you're talking about.
The first page, the top half of the first page.
3A and B, okay.
Where A.
Right under Finnegan.
Okay.
Right
under the
3A and 3B.
Okay.
That was where we had a lot of the discussion. And I do see in 3B there's a definition that's included in there, but I just wanted to make sure that it was clear to the board and clear to the members of the public that
So
what
you're
the
saying
term
the
inventory
word
reconciliation means, because historically, inventory reconciliation was an audit, and we documented that audit in a report. And that's not what we're trying to say here. Now the term says inventory reconciliation means the performance of an inventory, which is different. Performance of an inventory is not inventory reconciliation. That's just a count. A reconciliation is an actual audit. And so we're changing the definition here, and to me it adds confusion to what we're actually asking and the intent here. So I'd be curious as to especially those members that are in the public that are very familiar with doing these reports and these audits. Is it just me that I'm confused about it and I just need to accept this new definition, or will it cause confusion to the public?
So, can you read again what you're proposing it be changed to?
To me,
So 3A
I'd like to remove the word reconciliation unless it's referring to an audit on a report.
So in
That's in B.
3A, where it says reconciliation, you would remove that?
So it's in 3A and 3B, every place it says reconciliation. So it would read, any controlled substance not covered in paragraph 1 or 2, no later than 3 months after the loss that a controlled substance is identified pursuant to an inventory under subparagraph B or otherwise. And then, unfortunately, B goes into what an inventory reconciliation is, and I would change that to say inventory of a controlled substance not covered by paragraph 1 or 2 shall be performed at least once every 2 years. And that's currently required by DEA and current regulation. It's not an inventory reconciliation. So what this is actually confusing is it implies that you still need to do an audit every 2 years on every drug. And I don't think that's what we wanted to do. We only wanted to do targeted drugs that are shown to a loss.
So you want to change this to a physical inventory count?
No,
Or
just to
a
take the word
physical inventory?
reconciliation out. So under 3A, it would say pursuant to an inventory. And then B would say inventory of a controlled substance not covered under paragraph 1 or 2 shall be performed at least once every 2 years.
But I think in 3A, isn't reconciliation the right word there? Because it says 3 months after any loss of that controlled drug is identified pursuant to, wouldn't you find the loss pursuant to an inventory reconciliation?
But the thing is, we're not requiring an inventory reconciliation every 2 years. We're only requiring an inventory routinely, and then the reconciliation if you have a loss. So the reconciliation is an audit, and from the committee's discussion, we were not requiring an audit of every controlled substance at all times.
But I think Debbie's point is that the only way you're going to know if you have a loss is when you're comparing the physical count to the perpetual inventory.
That's an inventory. That's not an inventory reconciliation. A reconciliation.
It actually is.
No,
it's not.
I think what what Maria is referring to with reconciliation is the reconciliation between the invoices.
That's the full reconciliation audit that we talk about in the other parts of here are the actual, you look at all the inputs, you look at all the outputs, you look at all the waste. That's different than doing an inventory count and comparing it to a perpetual inventory. And what we talked about in the committee was if you do an inventory and you see something is missing and you're reporting a loss, then you must do a full reconciliation audit. So the term reconciliation to me is equivalent to audit. So, and I'm thinking that's
We
what
use different terminology
in the
in the
financial
auditing
word.
field.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. I think the intent, Maria has summarized the intent of what the board wanted. I think that's confusing the way that it's stated.
Okay.
So how would you clear it up? I made a suggestion, but I'm
Yeah,
not sure that's the best.
I think that is the best suggestion, reading this over. And
Because then you wouldn't need the second part too. For the purposes of this of subparagraph, you wouldn't need to define it anymore.
So I just have another question, and I apologize because I'm not part of the committee. So if 3A says that you determine that the inventory has a loss based on just doing an inventory.
Right.
And you have to report that no more than 3 months after you have, no later than 3 months after the loss is figured out. So do we have in here somewhere then, if you, during an inventory reconciliation, you detect a loss, do we address how soon after the inventory reconciliation you have to report it?
The report, yeah.
So I think that where there might be a little bit of confusion is what this is saying in 3A, and correct me where I get the policy wrong, but I believe what the policy is that through inventory activities, if you identify a loss, you're reporting the loss under 1715.6 or whatever that is. But for purposes of this, what it's saying is if you identify a loss of that drug, you're then going to have to do the full inventory reconciliation activities for that item.
And I like what you just said, is maybe changing the word reconciliation to inventory activities.
Yeah.
That makes it
That's
more
a good
clear,
idea.
and it's not confusing it with the reconciliation audit or the reconciliation report.
Right.
So I'd like that term. Thank you, Ms. Sodergren. If that's okay.
I think that's great.
So then you would just
Make that
change
change.
those three places to activities.
That works.
Okay, got those?
Thank you.
So, okay, so can you just read what it would say again?
Okay. Do you want me to read?
Go ahead and read it.
Sorry, you have a lot of reading to do anyway.
Thank you. Thank you.
3A, for any controlled substance not covered by paragraph 1 or 2, no later than 3 months after any loss that is controlled substance is identified pursuant to inventory activities under subparagraph B or otherwise. Inventory activities of a controlled substance not covered by paragraph 1 or 2 shall be performed at least once every 2 years. For the purposes of this subparagraph, inventory activities means the performance of an inventory and other functions necessary to identify losses of controlled substances since the last inventory, I would not just take, since the last inventory activities, you could say that or just take out the word activities. Since the last inventory covering controlled substances, whichever is more recent.
Actually, that last one, couldn't you just make it report, inventory report? Isn't that what we're doing every 2 years?
No, this is not referring to reports. That's the confusing part.
Right.
This is only referring to inventory activities, which is not related to audits or reports.
Oh, I thought you said earlier this is that every 2-year report we have to do.
This says report.
Isn't this section referring to that every 2 years that report?
That's a DEA required report. I'm sorry to confuse you, but that's not a reconciliation. That's a different.
I know it's not a reconciliation report, but isn't it still a report? Since
I would
the
prefer not
last inventory-
to mention that, though, because I think that confuses the public, because right here, we're all talking about is the audit and the reconciliation report. So let me read B again. Inventory activities of controlled substance not covered by paragraph 1 or 2 shall be performed at least once every 2 years. For the purposes of this subparagraph, inventory activity means the performance of an inventory and all other functions necessary to identify losses of controlled substances. And I would probably end it there.
Yes,
It just
Yeah.
gets to be too much after that.
because it's a definition.
So just to make it black and white instead of gray.
So I guess, is that what, in other places, that's what we call it, is activities versus report? What do we call it in that 17?
So the report and the audit are covered under 1 and 2. All the drugs that are Schedule 2 and all the drugs that are under 2, which currently list 4 drugs, those require a full audit and a full report every 3 months.
Okay, I'm talking once again about that. Don't we reference the DEA, don't we reference that like every so often you have to do a report of all controlled substances?
It's referenced further down as that the DEA report could suffice as an inventory. You don't have to duplicate it.
So I'm just saying, if you're going to call this activities, then we need to carry activities maybe down to there too, or, because aren't you referencing in B, the DEA report?
No, I think that's too confusing. I'd prefer not to. I think that's a little confusing.
But isn't that what they're referencing, that you have to do every 2 years?
Where's the wording there? I'm looking for it.
It doesn't necessarily need to be the same report. I think what Ms. Villa is saying is that B, the first sentence B, must be performed at least every 2 years. In many situations, that is going to be the DEA biannual report.
Yes,
But
you
it is
wouldn't replace.
confusing to say that, and where you could say every 2 years, and we, as it says before, and the DEA report could suffice or could be performing this role. I just think it's adding a lot of confusion. You want to say that?
What's that?
So I think the reference to, I'm sorry, I think that the DEA references in the FAQs where we're saying that you can use that as your physical count.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know
That'd
that
be
we need
clarifying,
to,
yeah.
and I think this maybe gives the regulated public flexibility. We're saying this is what the minimum is. You're going to have to do these inventory activities once every 2 years. If they want to do it more frequently, they absolutely can. If they want to leverage the DEA, they absolutely can. But I think if we give flexibility in the language, then the PIC, using their professional judgment, could maybe determine how to implement it, unless you feel very strongly that it needs to be dictated in a very specific manner.
I don't think it does. So do we have consensus here?
So we need to amend the...
We need to admit, well, you read it.
Yeah.
You read it, so,
Okay.
okay.
And we're ending it after controlled substance and not going on with the rest of the paragraph.
What are you looking for?
Correct.
Is there any other public comment on that?
I don't, more public comment? Great. Okay. So the motion is to,
Adopt as amended.
So it'll be initiating a rulemaking.
the initiating rulemaking for amendment to Title 16, 17, 15.65, articulated by Maria, as articulated by Maria.
And if you could just include that if there's non-substantive changes that need to be made.
Oh, certainly, and we'll delegate to the executive officer the authority to make any non-substantive changes.
So this is still considered a committee motion.
Yeah.
Therefore, we don't need a second.
Oh, we amended it.
Alan?
Oh, with the amended, so we do need a second, I guess.
Yeah, because we changed it.
Yeah, it's been changed.
So it's not considered
Right.
still.
Alan, I'd like to make a comment before we move on.
Yes.
As you know, we continue to have very big losses. And by the time we find out, it's kind of too late. Can we figure any way that to prevent that? I mean, we got 30 cases, over 10,000, lost. I mean, that's a lot.
Well,
But
it
we
is.
have to figure a way to how to prevent that. I mean, we keep on seeing those big losses continue to happening. So can we figure any way?
Well, we thought this is kind of like step one. And we thought that we would start out with this, we'll see what kind of results we get, and we're going to monitor this really closely. And so we'll see, since these four will be the red flags for this report, we can add more if we find that if there's other losses, and if this is effective in spotting those losses, we'll have more or less a reason or proof that it's effective. So we thought this would be kind of a bellwether to see if it's effective. So I'd just like to stick with these to start.
As long as we don't have any regular mandatory reporting to the board to catch those red flag, we continue to have this kind of problem. So I would like to see in the future some kind of mandatory reporting regularly.
I didn't hear that. What was it?
I repeated, Albert.
Yeah, what I'm saying is right now they're only reporting when there's a loss. But I would like to see in the future that we have them report to the board regularly what's the control inventory, and also what they purchase and what they dispense, so we know when there's a high volume, high quantity of being ordered, so it's a red flag. So what I'm trying to say is some kind of mandatory regular reporting to the board so we could catch a red flag.
I think that's covered in the upcoming, Ann, do you want to address that
Yeah, so I
quickly?
think at the committee meeting yesterday, it was decided that that might be a future committee discussion, so a future agenda item.
Right.
Okay, so, Alan, you're making this motion, correct?
Yes.
So I will second it, okay? Now, do we have any public comment at this point? No? Okay. All right. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hands.
Is that everybody?
That's everybody, okay. Unanimous. Let's move on.
All right. Now we'll have a discussion and consideration of the proposed amendments to Title 16, 1715.6, relating to reporting drug losses. We're going to continue our discussion on the current requirements regarding the reporting of drug losses. Historical drug loss information is provided in the chair report. As indicated in the data, the number of drug loss reports we've received has more than doubled since financial year 15-16 and continues to increase. The data also reflects a significant decrease in the overall dosage units reported and lost in the most recent fiscal year. As indicated in the report, the vast majority of reported cases losses involve 100 or less dosage units. During our previous discussion, we considered a draft proposal intended to modify the reporting requirements. However, after discussion, it was determined that additional consideration was necessary. Since that time, staff and council have, excuse me, and I have met to further evaluate the appropriate conditions which drug loss should be filed to the board. While tablets and capsules represent the most common dosage forms for which a drug loss report is submitted, additional forms of drugs are included in the proposal to provide more clarity while ensuring professional judgment can also be used. During our meeting yesterday, the committee discussed the revised proposal, which is included in attachment 2 in your meeting materials. That's the one that says 1715.6, reporting drug loss. The committee noted that one possible area that needs to be considered for incorporation are the medications delivered via infusion, including patient-controlled analgesia. Ultimately, the committee determined that the continuous dose infusions should be incorporated into the provisions related to multi-dose containers. In addition, we're recommending to use the term used for the DEA drug loss reporting, significant, when it comes to drug loss reporting falls under the professional judgment of the PIC. This morning, you should have received updated language that incorporates the committee. What's that? There's something back there? Okay. Updated language that incorporates the committee's direction. So, any public comment? Board comment? All right, the committee is offering the following motion. Recommend to the board to approve the proposed amendment related to the reporting of drug losses and policy changes recommended by the committee, and delegate to the executive officer and council the authority to make non-substantive changes.
Okay, do we have any public comment? Okay, that's a motion, and that's a committee motion, so
Right.
we don't have a second. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand, please. Okay. It's unanimous. It's unanimous. We can go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Now, the item is discussion and consideration of the legislative proposal to establish an alternative disciplinary process. We had a great discussion on this. We had some confusion, and so we're essentially going to send this back to committee. We had send this back to committee, and we're going to focus on the general comments in support of the proposal, but we're going to add in the oral presentation by both the respondent and the inspector that's going to be more of a meeting, a collaborative process. This was misunderstood by the public, it's misunderstood by the board, and I apologize for that. So there's going to be more, and hopefully we'll organize a meeting prior to our next scheduled meeting, May 6th, to discuss this. And now we have some impetus behind this. We seem to be mutually on the same page, and so essentially this is going back, continuing in committee and be brought back at the next board meeting and be brought back at the next committee meeting. Next item is discussion. Oh, any public comment on that?
Again, Danny Martinez with the California Pharmacists Association. I want to thank Chair Shad. There was some confusion, and we are almost there with this proposal, and we look forward to working with the chair at the next committee meeting. We're almost there. So thanks.
All right. Thank you, Danny. Next item, discussion and consideration of policy regarding referrals by pharmacies and pharmacists to law enforcement for narcotic diversion by employees. As detailed in the report, the board routinely investigates and takes action against licensees involved in drug diversion. As the board, we have taken actions to encourage better inventory controls and develop training. We've considered that there are additional opportunities for action. One such area previously considered was the requirement to refer such diversion to local law enforcement. The board previously decided not to pursue mandating referral of drug diversion cases to local law. As an alternative to a mandate, the committee and board wishes to consider adopting a policy statement regarding the referral of such matters to drug diversion, of these drug diversion cases. As a committee, we discussed the draft policy statement and noted general support for the concept. As indicated in the meeting materials, and the policy statement is intended to encourage licensees to contact law enforcement for guidance on drug diversion matters. After consideration of public comments, changes were made to the policy statement. The committee is offering the following policy statement as a recommendation to the board. In recognition of the ongoing national opioid crisis and in addition, the mandatory reporting obligations that the board has included in BPC 4104, the board encourages pharmacies and pharmacists to report to law enforcement matters involving all drug diversion. Board comment? Public comment? Oh, she's not commenting. Okay.
I just don't even think I could have said it better myself, Alan, so good job.
All right. So that's the committee's motion.
Okay. No public comments, so all those in favor of the committee motion, raise your hand, please. Keep it up. Okay, unanimous. Passes. Let's go on.
Next item is discussion and consideration of DEA suspicious order report systems, SOARS. God, I love that. Mandatory reporting requirement. On October 23, 2019, the DEA launched the Suspicious Order Reporting System online, which is a new centralized database required by the Substance Use Disorder Prevention that promotes opioid recovery and treatment for patients in the Community Act. This support act requires that all DEA registrants that distribute controlled substances report suspicious orders to the DEA, including pharmacies, wholesalers, and clinics. Okay. Next item, discussion and consideration of the board's enforcement statistics. In attachment 4 of the meeting materials, enforcement statistics for the first 2 quarters of the fiscal year. Since July 1, the board's received 1,307 complaints and has closed 1,437 investigations. The board has issued 191 letters of admonishment, 785 citations, and referred 119 cases to the Office of the Attorney General. The board has secured 6 interim suspension orders and been granted 2 Penal Code 23 suspensions and issued 1 cease and desist. Further, the board has revoked 59 licenses, accepted disciplinary surrender of 57 licenses, denied 7 applications, and imposed other levels of discipline against 90 licensees or applicants. As indicated in the materials, the board currently has 1,473 field investigations pending as of January 16. Below is a breakdown providing more detail. We have 79 cases under review for assignment, averaging 20 days, 1,010 cases under investigation, averaging 186 days, 261 investigations under supervisor review, averaging 107 days, and 46 investigations under the second level of review, averaging 20 days, and 77 investigation waiting final closure, averaging 23 days. After reviewing the investigative timeframes, the committee expressed concern with the current supervisor review time, and the committee was advised that improvement will be reported during the next meeting. The future meeting date is scheduled for May 6th. We hope to have one prior to that. That's the report, Mr. President. Hey.
Steve Gray is an individual. You were so fast, you didn't ask for comment on
Too
the
fast for you, Steve?
item
But
E.
no.
Item E.
Excuse me.
the Suspicious order system. Upon reflection of that, I did a brief unscientific poll of whether pharmacists understood that that applies to pharmacies. And pharmacies who are supplying medical offices, pharmacies that are supplying other pharmacies, in other words, distribution. And I find they had no clue, I mean, the ones I talked to, that they are now coming under this system. And so that may be something that the committee wants to consider as maybe a recommendation for an FAQ or a script or something for that.
I agree wholeheartedly on
And
that.
I also contacted a person who deals with the 3PL, and they're not sure whether that applies to them too, because they don't take title, and they operate, as you know, as just a holder or shipper. And I'm not sure whether that system, I haven't checked with the DEA, but I think my comment is I think that needs to maybe be a future item or some consideration. But pharmacies, there are quite a few pharmacies that distribute drugs to medical offices, clinics, hospitals that distribute from one hospital to another. All of those come under what is called distribution, not dispensing. And so I think there has to be some consideration. At the wholesaler level, all the wholesalers, especially the big ones who've been fined $25 million in one case, that includes doing proactive investigation as to whether the uses to whomever you're distributing it actually have a legitimate need for it. So the big wholesalers have that. Some of them have lost their DEA registrations because they are required to actually go out to the place they're sending it and see if it really exists, and to have built into their computers proactive screening of every orders so that they can identify the unusual orders, etc. And I don't think that's something that's well understood by pharmacies, hospitals, and others that are distributing to other licensees.
Right, and it does mention here in the SOAR's online statement here that suspicious orders, including pharmacies, wholesalers, and clinics.
Right.
But everybody focuses on the wholesalers.
Right.
And so I think further elaboration on this does merit focus. So
Right, right.
we'll bring this up again and make sure something gets in the
Right, and
in
it
the script.
also includes internal wholesalers. For an example, pharmacies that have their own warehouse. Thank you.
I'm confused.
Thank you, Steve.
This is, how are we going to add information to the DEA, because the DEA program is not a board program. This is the DEA program, it's not a board program. Okay. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have a side conversation. I guess I'm a little confused, because this is a DEA program that we're just talking about. It's not board policy or a board program. So what additional information are we going to provide in this script other than what the DEA program is about?
Well, what I was envisioning is making sure this information gets out and emphasizing that pharmacies, but in particular, are responsible for this also.
How are they, it's not a DEA requirement.
Beg your pardon? Say again.
How are the pharmacies themselves responsible for what, I guess? For the, because the pharmacies themselves are not reporting to the SOARS program. So I'm confused.
said they're responsible to do that, so if that's not correct,
Well,
are they responsible or aren't they responsible?
Maybe I misunderstand what the SOARS program is about. I thought the SOARS program was about suppliers and providers, not providers is the wrong word, of controlled substances using either a CSOS or DEA 222 form requiring reporting to the DEA, that they provide information to the SOARS program about suspicious suspicious transfers of medications. So it's if you are a wholesaler or a provider of routine filling of orders. Now, I understand that there's some minor transfers of, of short drugs or those kinds of things between licensed pharmacy entities, but those entities don't necessarily report to SOARS. Or is that part of the requirement? Is that
It says all DEA registrants, so.
yeah, see, I think we need more definition. on it.
I guess it'll all be fleshed out in the script article.
Yeah.
Well, or else we can have it on as an agenda item
Okay,
next time.
thank you.
No.
Okay.
End of report.
Thank you, Alan. I've had a request for a short break before we get into the ledge reg section, so we will take 10 minutes and return. Thank you.
No.
Welcome back. The next report is legislation regulation report, and the chair of the committee is me, and I'm looking for my notes that were here. This is weird. They were here. Well, they disappeared, so I'm gonna have to. Excuse me, it's going to take a couple of minutes. Okay, here we go. On behalf of the Legislation Regulation Committee, I'm happy to provide this report. Oh, wait a minute. You're back. I'm going to take something out of order. Yesterday, we had comments that were not on the agenda, and a couple of people missed the meeting yesterday and want the opportunity to speak, so I'm going to allow that. Please.
Good morning. I really appreciate giving me that opportunity. My name is Geneviève Clavel, and I'm really concerned recently because a lot of the pharmacy apparently don't know how to read. When you have medication, we say for single use only. You cannot, if your prescription is over that amount, you cannot go out, take one of the cartridge from some, and then just tape it on the top. I don't know what kind of technique was used. I don't know if somebody changed the solution inside. I think it's a very dangerous way of prescribing medication. And I think some education maybe need to be done that when the medication is for single use only, you have to give the entire extra package versus take it from somebody and tape it over, because that breaks all the technique and so on. So I just think maybe that's a way to educate. Also about opiates, the medical board designed a contract for physician and patient and the pharmacist to sign on opiates. It's not a law, that's a suggestion. And I knew the minute they did that, both physician and pharmacists will say to the patient, it's a law, you have to sign that. That's all. I think education is important. And I'm very pleased to see you do a lot of education, so I thought you could do that also. And also when a doctor orders an antibiotic who's in conflict with your medication, it's better if you call the doctor to change that prescription, except to wait 2 days and tell the patient, oh, sorry, we cannot give you because the conflict. It's not part of your job. If you have a conflicting medication, to call a physician to send that prescription. That's all. Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? I guess we only had one. Okay, now we will do the legislation regulation report. First section, discussion, consideration of board-sponsored legislation, 2019 sunset review items resulting in possible legislation. As detailed in the chair report, the board included several legislative proposals in its sunset report. In general, the report established the board's desire for statutory changes in the specified areas. Yesterday, as part of our meeting, we had the opportunity to review statutory language to ensure it appropriately reflects the board's policy and would effectuate the board's policy. I will highlight these areas as part of my report. This doesn't do it.
My computer's really old, sorry.
Second. Okay. Okay, as included in the meeting materials, the first proposal would amend Business and Profession Code Section 4427.3 and add a new section to expand the locations in which an ADDS can be licensed. The expansion would include authority to license ADDS to be used in all facilities listed in Health and Safety Code Section 1250, as well as other locations licensed by the state that, as a functional licensure, are authorized to offer medication services. The board approved the statutory proposal at its November 2019 board meeting. No action was taken by the committee. Next, amend BP. Am I good? One more second. Okay, before I move on to the next one, is there any public comment? No. Okay. Next, amend Business Profession Code Section 4161 and 4400 to provide an alternative pathway to licensure as a non-resident third-party logistics provider. This item was included in the board's report, but it will be the first time we have reviewed the language. The proposal will create an alternative pathway for the licensure of a non-resident third-party logistics provider similar to the out-of-state inspection process used for licensure of non-resident sterile compounding pharmacies. As noted in our Sunset Report, some states continue to regulate 3PLs as wholesalers in conflict with federal law, which creates a problem for licensure in California. This statutory change would remedy the issue by creating the alternative pathway. Lost it. The proposed language is included as part of Attachment 1 and included the proposed amendment to Business Profession Code 4161H. After discussion and consideration, the committee determined it would be appropriate to also accept VAWD accreditation as an alternative pathway to licensure as well. The committee is offering the following recommendation. Pursue the statutory change consistent with the board's Sunset Report, as well as to include VAWD accreditation as another alternative pathway to licensure. Do I have any board comments? No. Any public comment? Okay. I don't understand. Oh, I'm sorry. Please.
Steve Gray is an individual. Yesterday was a great meeting, and look forward to the next one in March or something. But I did make a recommendation yesterday that it was unclear in the proposed language whether the inspection, now done by VAWD, had to be done before license was granted. Mm-hmm. And a simple change from the word is to has been was what I recommended, and I would encourage you to make a motion to make that change so it is clear to people outside of this state who do not attend these meetings that they have to have that VAWD inspection before they can get a California license.
Thank you.
If I can suggest, we can clarify the language to, I'm not sure that it's those words exactly, if you don't mind, but the intent of the policy is to ensure that there's some kind of an inspection and eyes on the place in advance of us issuing the license. So if the board feels comfortable with that policy and that change, you could empower staff to make it, and we can run it through the chair of the committee, should that be the board's desire.
Old computer. Okay, so we're back to the statutory change. Procedure-wise.
Yes, so I think you've given the direction.
Very good. So, no more additional public comment. No more additional board comment. We're going to vote on this, and we can vote on this and give Ann the right to make those word changes. So, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Okay. Unanimous, good. Okay. I'd like to find out where my notes wound up. Yeah. I'm going to take another 5-minute break so I can get my notes reprinted because this is going to take forever. Sorry. Ready to go. Okay, the next item which amends BPC sections 4127.3, 4129.4, and 4316, relates to the cease and desist appeal hearing. Clarifies that a hearing date of a cease and desist appeal must occur within 5 business days. Currently, the law specifies that such an appeal must occur within 5 days, not 5 business days, which is problematic for scheduling, especially if an appeal is requested over a holiday weekend. As a practical matter, the scheduling of such hearings must be coordinated with counsel, the board president, or vice president, as well as respondent. During our committee meeting, public comment suggested that clarification of the time frame may also be appropriate as it relates to the time frame for the president to issue a decision. Ultimately, the committee agreed that such amendment would also be appropriate. The committee is offering the following motion: pursue this statutory change consistent with the board's sunset report and to include 5 business days to issue the president's response. Attachment 1 includes the proposed language provided to the committee. Are there any board comments? Any public comments? Okay, this is a committee motion, so all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. It's unanimous. We will move on. Next is to amend Business Profession Code Section 4343 to expand the prohibition against non-pharmacies using any words for licensed pharmacy. The next item, this item, would prohibit any non-pharmacy website from using words like pharmacy, similar to the current prohibition on signs displayed within or affixed to buildings, unless there is a licensed pharmacy within the building. This proposal was included as a technical change with the board's sunset report. During our meeting yesterday, the committee heard public comment in support of the proposal. The committee is offering the following recommendation: pursue this statutory change consistent with the board's sunset report. The proposed language to amend BPC 4343 is included as part of attachment 1, as I know you've all read. So, are there any board comments? Any public comments? All those in favor of the... Sorry. I'm trying to make up for the time we lost. Or I lost.
Good morning.
Go ahead.
Lenore Swan, pharmacy technician. I have a question about, or actually clarification about non-pharmacies. What do you mean exactly? And the reason I ask is because I know that Allscripts worked with medical practices to have dispensaries in their medical buildings. Is that the kind of facility that you're talking about, or something else? I just need clarification.
Well, as I understand, there's quite a few different ones, but why don't you...
Yeah, that's why I was looking here, and it says the word, any sign bearing the word pharmacist, pharmacy, apothecary, drugstore, druggist, drugs, medicine, medicine store, drug sundries, remedies. And on any building that it should have a pharmacy holding a license issued by the Board of Pharmacy.
Okay, so then that would effectively kind of close down these dispensaries.
Right, so therefore, if it doesn't have a license issued by the Board of Pharmacy, it shouldn't say pharmacy.
So they just can't use that language, and that on buildings, that's existing law. All we're doing is taking the concept from existing law and applying it to websites as well.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right, thank you.
Hi there, Mike Pavlovich. It's a very interesting situation. I've reported these in the past, and just yesterday doing a web search noticed an online pharmacy selling steroids and other things that they're not registered anywhere. My question is, to what degree will the board address this? And I know the process of reporting, filing a complaint, but literally you could be inundated with pursuing these types of things. Are they just simply sent on for referral to other regulatory agencies, or Department of Justice. What happens once the complaint is made?
Well, why don't you tell?
So I think that that probably goes a little bit beyond the agenda item, because the agenda item is just the statutory proposal. But I'd be happy to talk to you after the meeting and just kind of talk to you a little bit about process, if that's helpful.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any more public comment? Let's have a vote. All those in favor, raise your hands. Albert, are you with us? Ricardo? Are you with us? Okay. Unanimous. Thank you. Did you find anything? We can't talk about it. Okay, next. To amend Business Profession Code Section 4400 and add BPC section to assess a fee for an inspection resulting from the remodel of a sterile compounding pharmacy. This proposal was developed through the board's licensing committee and approved for sponsorship at the May 2019 board meeting. As approved, this proposal would require an assessment of a remodel inspection fee for in-state sterile compounding pharmacies, and further would assess an inspection fee and reimbursement for travel costs for an out-of-state sterile compounding inspection under similar conditions. As this was previously approved for sponsorship, no action is required. Is there any board comment? Is there any public comment? Okay, moving along. Next is to amend BPC Section 4312 to expand the provisions for cancellation of a facility license. This item expands the authority for the board to cancel a facility license to include all board licensed facilities. Under current law, the provision is limited to only some facility licenses. This proposal was included as a technical change with the board's sunset report. The committee is offering the following recommendation. Pursue this statutory change consistent with the board's sunset report. The proposed language is to amend BPC 4312 is included as part of attachment 1. Are there any board comments? Are there any public comments? Okay, all those in favor of the recommendation, please raise your hands. Unanimous, thank you. Next is to amend BPC Section 4314 to clarify that a citation is not considered disciplinary action. This item clarifies that the board does not consider a citation to be a disciplinary action. The proposal was included as a technical change with the board's sunset report. The draft language is included in attachment 1. I noted that the language in Section E incorrectly refers to letters of admonishment. The language should read, the issuance of a citation pursuant to subdivision B of Section BPC 4314 shall not be construed as a disciplinary action or discipline for purposes of licensure or the reporting of discipline for licensure. The committee is offering the following recommendation. Pursue the statutory change consistent with the board's sunset report to amend BPC 4314. Now, all along, we have not been considering the citation to be a disciplinary action, but this clarifies it for everybody else. So, all those, do we have any board comments on this? Do we have any public comments? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Unanimous. Thank you. We move on. Next is discussion and consideration of board-approved legislation for sponsorship. Members, all of the items included under Agenda B are board-approved legislation for sponsorship. As such, I intend to quickly review each one and will take public comment after discussion of the entire section. The approved language is included in Attachment 2 of the meeting materials. The first one is to amend BPC Section 405211 regarding continuing education requirement for pharmacists prescribing Schedule II drugs under a collaborative practice agreement. The proposal provides for pharmacists who prescribe Schedule II drugs under a CPA, or Collaborative Practice Agreement, to complete continuing education for prescribers on the hazards of opioid use. This measure was approved for sponsorship at the January 2019 board meeting. As part of our discussion yesterday, it was suggested that the committee consider as a future agenda item establishing a requirement for CE related to opioids, including the risks of addiction associated with the use of Schedule II drugs. Next one is amend, remember, I'm going to take comment after this section. Next is to amend BPC Section 4052 to allow pharmacists to furnish non-opioid medication-assisted treatment pursuant to a statewide protocol. This proposal would provide for the authority for a pharmacist to furnish non-opioid medication-assisted treatment pursuant to a statewide protocol and was approved for sponsorship at the May 2019 board meeting. Next is to amend BPC Sections 4052 and 4052.6 to expand the conditions for pharmacists operating under a collaborative practice agreement. This proposal would expand the use of the conditions under which pharmacists could operate under a collaborative practice agreement and was approved for sponsorship at the May 2019 board meeting. Next is to amend BPC Sections 4022.5, 4022.7, 4053, 4053.1, and 4053.2 to align requirements for designated representatives. This proposal clarifies and makes consistent the definition and requirements of designated representatives across various practice settings where appropriate. This proposal was approved for sponsorship at the November 2019 board meeting. Next is to amend BPC Section 4210 to change the requirements to qualify for an advanced practice pharmacist license. This proposal recasts the requirements for licensure as an advanced practice pharmacist to completion of one requirement as identified in BPC 4210A2 and is within completion of another requirement specified. Such completion would satisfy the requirement of the law in BPC 4210A2. This proposal was approved for sponsorship at November 2019 board meeting. Next, amend BPC Section 4427.7 and 4119.11 regarding the frequency between ADDS and pharmacy self-assessments. The proposal will align the ADDS self-assessment requirements with the pharmacy self-assessment requirement in Title 16 CCR 1715 and was approved for sponsorship at the November 2019 board meeting. That concludes this section. Are there any comments by the members on any of these items? Are there any public comments on any of those items? Not seeing any, I will move on. This concludes the legislative section. We're now going into the regulation portion. As I begin the regulation portion of my report, I'd like to note, as I did yesterday, that many of the board's regulations are progressing through the process. First, discussion and consideration of board-adopted regulations approved by the Office of Administrative Law. The board has one regulation recently approved by the Office of OAL. Actually, subsequent to, yesterday we had a couple more, so I will include those. First is Title 16 CCR Section 1749 related to the board's fee schedule. As included in the chair report, the board's fees will be increasing to address the structural imbalance within the board's budget. The new fees take effect April 1, 2020. Board staff are working with the department on implementation, including making necessary programming changes and updating system-generated notices. Staff is also working on a communication plan to ensure licensees and applicants are aware of the upcoming changes. The adopted language is included in Attachment 3. The next item that was approved by OAL, I'm going to list the three and then I'm going to take public comment. Proposed regulation to amend Title 16 CCR Section 1746.3 related to the naloxone fact sheet. The board has one regulation package currently under post-adoption review. The proposed regulations to amend Title 16 CCR Section 1746.3 related to the naloxone fact sheet. This fact sheet must be provided to consumers upon furnishing naloxone. As indicated in the meeting materials, a review by OAL was to be completed by January 27th, and in fact it was. Now, excuse me one second. All right, turns out that there were only two that were approved. So, do we have any board comments on those two? Do we have any public comments on those two? Okay. Next is discussion consideration of board-adopted regulations undergoing formal review by the Department of Consumer Affairs or the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. As indicated in Agenda Item E, the board has two regulations undergoing post-adoption review by DCA. I'll read the two and then I'll ask for comments. First is proposed regulation to amend Title 16 CCR Section 1706.2 related to abandonment of applications. The proposal updates the application abandonment language to include all licensing programs to ensure that all applicants have appropriate notice about the requirements for abandoning an application and reduce the administrative workload associated with the need for frequent amendments when new licensing programs are established. Formal post-adoption review by DCA began on December 11, 2019. The next one is proposed regulation to amend Title 16 CCR Section 1707.2 related to duty to consult. The proposal amends the board's regulations regarding the duty to provide consultation for mail-order pharmacies. Formal post-adoption review by DCA began on December 17, 2019. Are there any member comments on the two that I just read? Are there any public comments on the two that I just read? Not seeing any, I will move along. Next is discussion and consideration of board-approved regulations undergoing pre-notice review by the Department of Consumer Affairs or the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. Item F includes board-approved regulations undergoing pre-notice review. As indicated in the chair report, the board has 11 such regulations. I will quickly summarize each of the regulations. Unless otherwise noted in the chair report language, the current status and detailed timeline for each proposal is included in Attachment 6. Regulations under pre-notice, and again, I'll take comments after I've completed stating the 11 regulations. Regulations under pre-notice review by the Business Consumer and Housing Agency. At the time of preparing the meeting materials, 3 regulation packages were under pre-notice review. Item F1, the proposal would amend the board's regulations regarding the waiver requirements for off-site storage of records to allow those cited for a records violation to receive a waiver to store records off-site, and that's Section 1707. Item F2, the proposal establishes regulatory requirements for automated refill programs, Section 1717.5. Item F3, the proposal updates the renewal requirement language to include all licensing programs and reduce the administrative workload associated with the need for frequent amendments when new licensing programs are established, and this is Section 1702, 1702.1, 1702.2, and 1702.5. I was advised that as of January 24, 2020, the board's off-site storage package, which I read as F1, has been approved for notice. Staff will be referring the matter to OAL to initiate the formal rulemaking process. In addition, the board's renewal requirement proposal was also approved for notice. Regulations under pre-notice review by DCA Legal or DCA Budget Office. Item F4. includes the board's proposal to amend sections 1793.5, 1793.6, and 1793.65. The proposal establishes the training requirements and certification programs and updates the application for licensure for pharmacy technicians. As indicated in the chair report, this rulemaking was returned to the board for additional changes. The identified changes are necessary to ensure compliance with AB 2138 provisions relating to criminal conviction information. Specifically, the questions on the pharmacy technician application require updating to ensure compliance with the AB 2138 provisions that take effect July 1. Item F5 includes the board's proposal to amend section 1709 relating to pharmacy ownership, management, and control, including through trusts. Item F6 includes the proposal to amend section 1780 to 1783 at sequel to establish the regulatory framework for third-party logistics providers. Item F7 includes the board's proposal to amend section 1715 to update self-assessment forms for community and hospital pharmacies, including clarifying language as to the completion and certification requirements, as well as to incorporate changes in pharmacy law. Like previous agenda items, item F8 includes the board's proposal to amend Title 16 CCR Section 1784 to update the wholesaler 3PL self-assessment form. Item F9 includes the board's proposal to amend Section 1711 and 1713 and add Section 1715.1. Specifically, the proposal will require submission of quality assurance records to the board, update the board's regulations with respect to the use of an APDS, and identify the specific requirements for the annual completion of the ADDS self-assessment form. Item F10 includes the board's proposal to amend sections 1769 and 1770 related to criminal conviction, substantial relationship, and rehabilitation criteria. This proposal is necessary to implement the provisions of AB 2138 and will increase transparency and clarity to license applicants with respect to rehabilitation criteria the board considers when evaluating an applicant's eligibility for licensure. The last item under this section is F11, which includes the board's proposal to add section 1714.3 related to community pharmacy staffing. This proposal will establish the criteria a pharmacy must meet to identify and ensure a person is assigned to assist the pharmacist as needed when the pharmacist is working alone in compliance with BNP section 4113.5. Now, I went through these quickly, but as we all know, we've gone over these a number of times before. Members, do you have any questions or any comments related to the 11 items I just read?
I'd like to make a comment about number 11 because I see, I'm going into a lot of stores and I'm seeing pharmacists working alone. So I just would like to really see that we enforce this.
Thank you. Are there any public comments? Please come up, state your name.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. My name is Jazzy Graywell, and I'm with UFCW Western States Council. We were the sponsors of SB 1442, so also would like to comment on F11. Every day that SB 1442 is not effectively implemented, the public health is at risk. And in order to expand access to care and to curb the opioid abuse, pharmacists need to be able to focus on their license duties. That is why we're urging the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Board of Pharmacy to prioritize this regulatory package. There's no law or written policy that we are aware of that requires the Department of Consumer Affairs or an agency to finish their reviews or propose regulatory packages in any particular order. Given the public health urgency of these regulations, we respectfully ask for prioritization so our proposed regulations for SB 1442 can be released for formal public comment rulemaking by the Board of Pharmacy as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Jazzy. Okay, any other comments? No. Okay. That completes the regulation portion of the report, and therefore my report is concluded. Next, we will be going into closed session. So as I mentioned earlier, once closed session is completed, we will come back to open session, and at that time, we will conclude the day. So, thank you all for attending, and I expect most of you will probably not return for the open session in order to conclude the meeting. Thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you at the next meeting.